Greetings, brothers and sisters. Brother John Hargrove here, President, Division 421, Atlanta, Commissioner of the Southeast District. Tonight, we are continuing our officers training. We're looking at Message to the People, the Course of African Philosophy. We'll be reading the preface and the foreword tonight. Tonight is actually session, we can call it session one. It don't matter. It's technically session two because we did the history last week, and I hope everybody had a chance to review the recording of that. Very important as to the foundation of why this is such a priority. So that comes from the history that we talked about last week. So we'll open up with our pledge to our UNIA flag. If everyone would, you can please come off mute and repeat after me. Let people in. I commit my body, mind, and spirit
I commit my
I
body
commit my body, mind, and spirit
to the protection, defense, and security
to the protection, defense, and security
of the red, black, and green.
of the red,
of
black,
the
and
red,
green.
Sorry, I'm letting people in the background. I dedicate my life to the redemption of Mother Africa,
I dedicate my life to the
to
redemption
the
of Mother
redemption
Africa
Mother Africa,
the liberation of her scattered Black children.
and
and
to
the
the
liberation of her
scattered Black children.
scattered Black.
I accept for myself and my descendants
I accept for myself and my descendants
the teachings of universal African nationalism.
the teachings of universal African nationalism.
And I promise that our children will be instilled
And I
I
promise
promise that our children will be instilled
with the purpose and knowledge of themselves as African people.
with the
with the
purpose
purpose and knowledge of themselves as African people,
In order that the cause of our struggle
in order
in
that
order that the cause of our struggle
will neither falter nor fail,
will
will
neither
neither falter nor fail,
until all Black people are free and united
until all
until
Black
all
people
Black people are free and united
through one God,
through
one
one
God,
one aim,
one
aim,
aim,
one destiny.
one destiny.
All right, you may be seated. You can mute your lines for a moment. We will jump into questions very briefly. So everyone, I think I tried to send them out last night, but I realized I didn't send them out till today. But please check your email. There's a list of questions that we'll be going over, hopefully tonight, but we'll do the reading first, obviously. But these are some things, just some of the things I would recommend you think about. Some things more important than others. We'll go over that in the questions, but one of my recommendations is to try to translate or interpret each paragraph. What is the author or the writer trying to communicate in each of the sections, and what is being emphasized, or what should we emphasize? So everyone should have these questions in your email. We'll do the reading first. You can answer them as we read, or you can wait until the end and try to remember what the answers are. Give me a second to pull up. Gotta pull up the text. Any questions or comments from last week or anything? And kind of want to focus on the text. Let me plug my mic in. Maybe that sound a little. Sorry. President John, that convention was 1935, correct? What convention Are you speaking about Brother Everett? That convention. We read 1934, then we read 1937 and 1938. Y'all able to see my screen, okay. That pushed him to start the class. Um, I believe it was the 37, but I could be wrong. It could be the 34. I know the 34 is where the 5-year plan was first brought forth, but I don't think the school was officially brought forth until 1937, to my knowledge. 1935, correct. That pushed him to start the class. Okay. Yeah. I think we will get into that tonight. Good question though. Any volunteer readers? All right.
I can read if you like.
Brother Israel.
Yes, sir.
Um, kind of more,
Pardon me.
give me I'll call on you. I feel like I only got like 10 minutes talking.
Let me know. I'm on standby.
I got you. That's what I was getting ready to say. Let me give it all I got. Um, then I'll call on you. But it's good exercise, vocal exercise. Okay. If there aren't any questions, again, everyone should know the text, Message to the People, Course of African Philosophy. This is the officers training, and you will see tonight why we consider this officers training. And I'll try to um, tell you when to highlight certain things. First thing, I will highlight Honorable Charles L. James, President General, UNIA-ACL. But Honorable Charles L. James, he is an individual to know and to remember. You will hear his name a few times in the foreword and the preface. But you must understand his connection to this text and to the UNIA and the history of the UNIA. But he wrote the foreword of Course of African Philosophy. All right. Brother Macy's just came through. I know he'll help with the reading. Trying to scroll down. Okay, there we go. In keeping with the constitutional provision and the aims and objects of the Universal Negro Improvement Association to establish schools and colleges for the racial education of our race, the founder and president general of the UNIA, Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey, made several attempts to educate some and re-educate others who would be charged with the responsibility of leadership in the UNIA. Very straightforward. He, that would be Mr. Garvey, sincerely felt that no one should be held responsible for his actions unless he or she is educated or trained to perform those responsibilities. And since the UNIA had become the largest responsible movement in racial history, its leadership should be thoroughly informed so that the proper information would be dispensed. Marcus Garvey was a man of vision, therefore, his students had to be visionaries. Um, Thoroughly informed so the proper information would be dispensed. A lot of this information is about being a good representative at the end of the day. In the base, very fundamental form of that is being a good representative of the race. Whether we like it or not, we are of the Negro, African, Black race. We have a connection. Our actions impact how people feel about us, the opinions that people feel about us as a people. So, on the base level, we should be an excellent representation of the race. But on another level, from a UNIA standpoint, we should be excellent representatives of the UNIA. So those are two distinct um, separate ways to look at it, but the key thing there is the proper information being dispensed, and this is again for representation, such that when we claim that we are representatives of the UNIA, we know what that comes with. We know how to answer or represent that representation. That's redundant. Marcus Garvey was a man of vision, therefore his students had to be visionaries. That's another important in-depth concept, but we'll talk about that more in several different contexts later. But that's something else that's very important. His students, as students, as Garveyites, we should have a level of vision, and we'll talk about that more. In every branch of the association, training departments were established. These included military training, training for nurses, and programs for juveniles. We recall that under his direction, a university was established at Claremont, Virginia, 1926. Smallwood Quarry Industrial Institute was renamed Universal Liberty University. Students came from various sections to enroll in the first venture. Your humble servant was one of the first trustees. So this is Charles L. James speaking of himself as one of the first trustees. The success or failure of this great educational attempt is a matter of history. That's interesting. Many attempts were aborted, but the idea lived on through forums, mass meetings, group discussions, lectures, book pamphlets. Mr. Garvey's speeches were widely circulated for the racial education and culture of the people. That would be mostly philosophies and opinions of Marcus Garvey. To Brother Everett's question, I think this answers it. In 1937, particularly, after an extensive European tour and the establishment of the parent body in London, England, the founder called a regional conference. Well, this is when he first called the group, but it doesn't necessarily say when the idea first came about. Called the regional conference at 355 College Street, Toronto, Canada. At this conclave, he selected the following officers of divisions, who, in his judgment, were qualified to give him the nucleus of creating what he proudly named the School of African Philosophy. So remember the things that we talked about last week. Review that recording again if you have to. But this is directly speaking to the intentions that Mr. Garvey laid out in the 37 convention, in the 1937 convention specifically. One thing that I've taken note of is a geographical aspect. As I read in, I think it was the 1934 UNIA papers, where Mr. Garvey had the appeal to the Negro, to the American Negro specifically. And when you look at the first class outside of Toronto, Canada, it's primarily focused in the United States, whereas the second class had a little bit more of an international aspect. We'll talk about that. Students of the first class were as follows: Arthur Clement Moore, Toronto, Canada; Charles Linnell James, so Charles L. James, that's the author of the Foreword; Gary, Indiana; James R. Stewart, Cleveland, Ohio; Thomas W. Harvey, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania; Nathaniel Grissom, Chicago, Illinois; Sarah Richardson Isaacs, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania; Ethel Waddell, Chicago, Illinois; Eleanor White, Chicago, Illinois; Teresa E. Young, which is a name that was in the UNIA papers; Cincinnati, Ohio representative; Abraham R. Roberts, Toronto, Canada. So, couple brothers from Toronto, but you see brothers as well as sisters. And again, Mr. Garvey felt that this was, or according to Charles L. James, was the nucleus of this school for education. As the names were called, this is Charles L. James saying that he had the qualifications required, but his ego told him that he had been an office boy in the parent body. He had shined Mr. Garvey's shoes. He traveled short distances with him, and he had heard all his speeches since 1923. He had attended all the conventions since that time and had visited Mr. Garvey in prison, and had become the youngest vice president in the famous New York local with over 40,000 members. I had been appointed by Mr. Garvey as president of the Newark division and state commissioner of New Jersey, and now as president of the Gary, Indiana division. I felt that I knew it all and that Mr. Garvey's time could be better spent on someone else. To my surprise, I had the rudest awakening of my life. This is a very important paragraph. If not for, and this is, I would say, in my opinion, humility is one of the unwritten lessons. But imagine, well, you don't have to imagine. Well, yeah, we can. We have to. If Charles L. James was arrogant, or egotistical, or just felt that you know, he knew it all or he knew enough. If that had been the case, there's a chance that this lesson would have been lost to time. So, one of the first things that we must be is either humble or at least curious. But we must be willing to learn. Um, the glass that's full can't receive anything else. So if we're walking around or walking within the UNIA with the idea that we know it all, we've done it all, there's nothing else that we can learn. I would just urge us to be careful in that opinion, and myself included. So be humble. None of us have the qualifications that Brother Charles L. James just listed. If he was willing to go through the course of African philosophy, I think it would be wise for us to do the same. Mr. Garvey shocked Charles L. James. He said to him publicly, James, you don't know. I know that you don't know because I have not taught you. And you will take the course of African philosophy so that when you say, I know, you will know that you know because you have been taught by me. From then on, there was no question. I enlisted for the duration. Maxima Ptahotep. um, but again, Mr. Garvey is being very clear. There's certain things that Charles L. James experienced and does have a level of knowledge of, but there's also some things that Mr. Garvey had not explained to him yet. So he made it very clear. You'll take the course so that when you say that you know, you actually you do. You're being honest. The class became one family. We ate together, roomed together, studied together, recognizing the professor as the chief architect of our intellectual destiny. As for me, it was a dose of humility mixed with the yearnings for knowledge. So I forgot that was there, but humility with yearning for knowledge. I would argue level of curiosity. He wanted the information, but he was also humble to receive the information. For 30 days and nights, with 2 sessions per day, mass meetings at 8 o'clock p.m., studying until the morning hours. We had no time for anything else but study, study, study. Then finally came graduation. So it talks to the camaraderie that was built in this process. Um, we'll continue. Let the record show that I received the highest grade. This is Brother Charles L. James speaking on himself, but at this time, there's no one to refute it. And without, I think this leads into one of the later lessons when Mr. Garvey says, if we're not there, then there's no reason for us to contend with that idea. So the record, according to Charles L. James, is that he received the highest grade. In every point of examination, I was graded E. So I'm assuming E for excellent. But this implies, this is something we'll talk about later. Every point of examination, this implies that there was some level of examination that took place. My classmates all agree that I was a leader of the first class in the School of African Philosophy. So, according to the 11 names that were mentioned, Charles L. James states that his classmates would agree that he was the leader of that class. Sorry. Leader of the class in the School of African Philosophy. We were charged with guarding the written course with our lives. The unwritten course was also to be engraved on the tablets of our memory. So it talks about written and unwritten courses. As I write this foreword, I am sorry to announce that all my classmates of that first class have joined with the Right Excellent Marcus Messiah Garvey and our ancestors. With all our human frailties, I am convinced that this first class has not failed our teacher and that we have been a shining example to those who come after us. So, um, again, Brother Charles L. James was the last living link to this information. That's one of the best ways I can put it, and it states it at this point in the history. Everyone else had transitioned, who had gone through the class, with the exception of Brother Charles L. James. Um, so. It just talked about taking an oath and protecting this with their lives. Also mentioned that the other students had done well, but again, Mr. Brother Charles L. James is the last living student of the first class, and he says this course is ours. Whatever is written, distorted, and injected by unauthorized persons using devices other than the proper way that was given to us by the founder and applying the benefits to their own personal benefit, please understand that, quote, there is a destiny that makes us brothers. None goes his way alone. All that we send into the lives of others comes back into our own. That's a very deep quote, but you know, you can't cheat the success that we're trying to achieve. And it'll be a collective, as Mr. Garvey kind of expounds, I believe, in lesson 3, where he talks about um, the first aim, that universal confraternity. But he mentions an aspect of there will be no individual successes or failures. And we must promote that concept that if one of us are not doing well, then we must all, kind of embrace that pain or have empathy for that pain. But he talks about all for one and one for all. So there will be no individual successes or individual failures. Either we will succeed collectively or we will continue to fail collectively. That's my understanding. Um, as the only surviving graduate of the first class, it is important for me to protect the interests of those who preceded me into eternity. So this is speaking to, again, we just talked about an oath that they took. This is Brother Charles L. James's, Honorable Charles L. James's reasoning for the publication of the work. He says, as the only surviving graduate of the first class, it is important for me to protect the interests of those who preceded me into eternity. And knowing that there are forces that are trying to distort history. So that's something else that we can talk about further. But there were forces at play. Some would argue what we read as part of those forces. Robert Hill and the UNIA papers. James R. Stewart had released or communicated with Robert Hill to be able to document a version of the School of African Philosophy, and that's my understanding. My understanding as to part of what Charles L. James is saying here, to distortion of history and having unauthorized individuals sharing the information. And we know, although Charles L. James is second President General, student of course of African philosophy, um, per the process, it was not authorized, and this speaks to the correct way to have that information and transfer of information authorized. Charles L. James says that I hereby authorize Dr. Tony Martin, who has been a recognized and appointed the authentic historian on the life and works of Honorable Marcus Garvey by the UNIA in convention. So convention came together. This was put forth on the floor of convention in some form, and it was agreed upon by the convention to have Honorable Dr. Tony Martin to edit and preserve and publish these works. It says that to publish the written document with the understanding that the right be preserved for future generations, which is the charge of the Honorable Marcus Garvey, founder. So I would argue that is us. When he talks about they published this book for future generations to maintain the legacy, maintain the teachings, and preserve the teachings. So without this authorization, the course of African philosophy would be hearsay outside of what's documented in the UNIA papers. But as far as an official, these are the teachings of the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, approved by the convention of the UNIA-ACL. We wouldn't have that without Honorable Charles L. James, in my opinion. Let me hope that in whomsoever hands these lessons fall, that they may use them wisely. For in these lessons there is eternal life for Africans at home and abroad, in that they testify to God's greatest gift of our race, to our race, in the person of the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, proclaim it to the world, Africa for the Africans, at home and abroad. That's very deep as well, that last paragraph. That's something to marinate on. Think about how you internalize that. But that seems very, very deep for me. Pause. Okay, that is the foreword. Any brief questions before we continue to the preface? Again, we have a whole list of questions that we will go through, but any clarity that is required before we proceed? 3 PGs out of the first class. I think that I wasn't supposed to put that in foreword. That was supposed to go in preface. Yeah, so that's a preface question. Thank you for that reminder that I didn't edit that PowerPoint. But yeah, that's a preface question. Okay, we're doing good on time. Course of African Philosophy is a unique document. With the exception of his poetical works, it is the closest thing to a book that Marcus Garvey ever wrote. I would highlight the last part of that sentence. That is very important for us. Again, with the exception of his poetical works, this is the closest thing to a book that Marcus Garvey ever wrote. So there are I think it is called the Poetical Works of Marcus Garvey, or it's something in regards to poetry of Mr. Garvey. I don't know the exact title. I don't have that text. We should get it. It is one of the books in the new Marcus Garvey library. But with the exception of his poetical works, we treat this as the closest thing to a book that Marcus Garvey himself ever wrote. We know that Philosophers and Opinions is there. Selected Writings and Speeches is there. Even the UNIA papers documents a lot of Mr. Garvey's writings. But for him to put together, to compile a text from beginning to end, this was the first book for Mr. Garvey to do that. It says, yet 46 years after his death, it is being published here for the first time. So it's being published 46 years, that'll be 1986 is when the text is first being published. But if you look at the authorship of the text, authorship is still credited to the right excellent Marcus Mosiah Garvey. It represents, as it were, the last political will and testament of a man who stands without equal in history of worldwide mobilization of African peoples. A very important line as far as what this text represents, last political will and testament of Mr. Garvey. For Marcus Garvey did not merely organize the most massive Black movement in the history of the United States. He also organized the largest and most successful movement among African peoples in the Caribbean area. In fact, as a serious pan-Caribbean movement cutting across political and linguistic barriers, Garvey's UNIA has no serious challenger. So political as well as linguistic barriers are some of the challenges that our ancestors overcame. We must do the same today as we expand and as a government. Garvey's organization has an equally singular record in Africa, where it established itself oblivious of political and linguistic barriers in the European colonies of England, France, Belgium, and Portugal, as well as in the independent state of Liberia and the racist state of South Africa. In Central America, too, the UNIA spread with great rapidity from Mexico to Panama. In Canada, it entrenched itself coast to coast from British Columbia to Nova Scotia. Scattered Africa fell within Garvey's organizational genius in every far-flung corner, whether Brazil, Australia, or Berry Dock, Wales. Mr. Garvey lived from 1887 to 1940. We should know August 17th, 1887, to June 10th, 1940. His years of all-encompassing triumph coincided with his sojourn in the United States from 1916 to 1927. So, of the great legacy of Mr. Garvey and the UNIA. We know that majority of that took place while he was in the United States. He was only in the United States for 11 years. And we must also understand 2.5 of those years he was incarcerated. So a lot of his success and accomplishments he was able to do within a span of 10 years, we can safely say. But then the obstacles, the challenges, now I was going to say lawsuits, but the indictments began to take place until his unfortunate transition in 1940. But again, we looked at the UNIA papers. We looked at 1934. We looked at 1937. We looked at 1938. I encourage you to still look at 1939. He still speaks on the course of African philosophy there for that class of graduates. And then 1940 is more of a somber year. Mr. Garvey is for the most part recovering from a stroke that took place in January. He finally gets a little bit of health around February, March, April, May. But some would say he kind of overexerted himself or didn't allow for enough rest. But he continued to work, got right back to work as soon as he could, and unfortunately transitioned June 10th, 1940. I believe, yeah, I believe a stroke was the official cause. I know he suffered a stroke early in January of that same year, but um, that's neither here nor there. What we should know, the years 1887 to 1940 is his life, and 1916 to 1927. I never received Brother Everett is going to send you, he's going to take care of that. I will add you, thank you for that. I'll add you to the future communication myself. His immigration to the country was, however, preceded by many long years of preparation for his life's work, long years of study, travel, and organizational work, culminating in the founding of the UNIA in his Jamaica homeland, 1914. So this is going to the inception of the UNIA. Well, that briefly. After his expulsion from the United States in 1927, Garvey's organization underwent a long and slow decline as the chief, Mr. Garvey, struggled to hold together his fragmenting colossus. From an inadequate headquarters in Jamaica and later in England, it was in 1937, 10 years after his deportation from the United States, 2 years after relocating to England, and 3 years before his death, that Garvey introduced his course of African philosophy. Next line is important. This was nothing less than a distillation of a lifetime of organizational experience. It contained a mixture of techniques he himself had utilized to achieve success in an attempt to incorporate the hard lessons he had learned with the benefit of an unfortunate hindsight. I don't like this word that's coming up, much of the Machiavellian. I don't like that word. I don't like how Tony Martin used that, but it is here. Much of the Machiavellian quality of the document comes from this latter consideration. So that's the benefit of an unfortunate hindsight. And it just talks about how Mr. Garvey says he would have done things a little bit different. I think said he would have had a less trusting, more cautious, I believe, approach was how it was summarized. Garvey had experienced in a painful way the treacherous potential enveloped within human nature. As I've spoken to, my officers in my division about is the young Garvey versus the old Garvey. And says that at this time he had experienced in a painful way the treacherous potential enveloped within human nature. So it's just a different, it's an older, more mature. I don't want to say less naive, but less optimistic, I would say, in regards to, well, I guess not saying optimistic in general, but I get naive optimism, having no reason, no proof as to why he should be optimistic about a particular individual or about the relationship that he could have. business-wise relationship with that individual. If he had life to live over, he seemed to be saying his would be less trusting, more cautious approach. So yeah, that's where he says that. He would be less trusting and more cautious in regards to people. The immediate purpose of the course of African philosophy, this is important as well, was to train. What is the purpose? What was the immediate purpose of the course of African philosophy? Was to train a cadre of UNIA leaders who would carry on the great work of the organization after Garvey's death. Garvey, so very important. We don't have to think about where we are in time. We just talked about Mr. Garvey's birth and death. We should understand, what this text was compiled for and who this text was compiled for. Garvey designed the 22 lessons in London and took them to Canada, where from August 24th to 31st, 1937, he conducted a regional conference for North American members of the UNIA-ACL. We talked about that last week. That was highlighted in that was the convention of 1937, August 24th to August 31st. And we read most of the minutes, not all of them, but you can read the minutes of the 1937 convention in the UNIA papers. Garvey's initial vehicle for imparting his accumulated experience was the School of African Philosophy, which met immediately after the conference. For the most of the month of September 1937, Garvey trained a select group of UNIA organizers from the North American field. So again, 1937 specifically focused around the North American field. They spent 12 or more hours together every day. This is repeating the conditions for the first class. They spent 12 more hours every day. They listened to Garvey's lectures, ate together, did their homework together. During the course of the month, each student was required to write out each lesson in his or her own handwriting. That's another important concept. If I got mine up here, just don't feel like it. I'll show y'all mine. I can show it to you before the day is over. It's a meeting, but I'll get to it. But highlight that as well. Each student was required to write out each lesson in his or her own handwriting, and what that means, it seems to be we've had questions about that in the past. Basically means writing out the book from lesson 1 to lesson 22 in your own handwriting. That is what I would understand the first students to have done in the first course of African philosophy, the first class of the School of African Philosophy. And that's also what has been taught and told throughout the years, as well as any of my elder students or graduates of the course of African philosophy have also mentioned this very same requirement. So this is this is not a requirement for certification out per se. I consider this more of a personal thing. And I also encourage each of us to truly pursue that. But if our ancestors in the first class in 1937 were able to do this in a month, and I know they were highly focused on it, we should be able to fulfill that requirement in our time as well. But that's more of a you and Garvey thing. It has nothing to do with certification outside of knowing that was a requirement of the original class. The course described by Garvey, and how did Mr. Garvey describe the course of African philosophy? This is important. He described it as, quote, a most rigid system of training, which covered over 42 subjects. So I would also highlight over 42 subjects. Mostly what I've read is I object to that, President. What do you object to?
You know how I feel about that, President John. I wrote that book, so I feel like everybody got to write that book.
Oh, I got you. See, but that puts you on another level. But I would say that's more of a bragging rights thing amongst graduates. So once you do go through it, you read the book, okay, that's cool. Did you sit through a class? Okay, that's cool. Did you get certified in a class? Okay, that's cool. But really, really, have you written out the course of African philosophy in your own hand. That is what I understand to be the highest um, level of recognition in my mind. Handwriting is subjective. It ain't about, it's going to help you improve your handwriting as well.
I'm just saying that it says that was a requirement to pass the course. That's what it says. So I'm gonna
Yes.
leave it there. It's
I,
your class, so you make the rules, boss.
look, Philly,
Just
it's gonna be rough in Philly. It's gonna be hard out there in Philly. Certified.
saying.
But I respect it. I understand it, and I encourage that. So officers, let's do the work. Others are putting in the work. Our ancestors are putting in the work. We're still able to do it in our time. Sister Kay, do you want to share how long it took you to complete it?
I'm sorry, say that again, President John.
You want to say how long it took you to complete the writing?
If I'm gonna be honest with you, we took the first class. I got to lesson 17, and then I didn't finish it until the second class. So I took the class, I passed the course, and I felt confident in passing the course, but I was determined to complete writing it because that was one of the requirements. So um, the second class came around and I finished it then. So I would say in that regard, it probably would have took 2 years.
That's honesty. And we know honesty is a proper character. And it is what it is. Like you've done it, so others can say what they want. It took me just over a year. So I started May 2021 and I finished May 29th, 2022. But yes, I would encourage all listeners, officers, leaders of the UNIA. I really hope, and let me get this clear. I hope y'all are not coming into this expecting, at the end of 6 months, things are going to just be different for us. That's not what this is. I've been studying this myself and sharing this information for, this will be the 5th year consistently. And it's still things in here that I'm learning and developing and getting better at. But I have to say that I've come a long way from where I was. So I know that it's working. I know that it's positive and progressive, but it's also a process. And that is the most important thing that I want everyone to take away. It's not just about coming together on Tuesdays for an hour and a half, reading a little bit of the lessons, answering some questions, to when you really internalize this information, um, it should change your daily habits. And that's really what Mr. Garvey will talk about in the beginning, challenging yourself on your daily habits and compounding that process. So if we can, learn more in a month or a week or 6 months or a year throughout a particular process, and we can compound that learning, Mr. Garvey says that after, 4 or 5 years, there'll be a distinct difference in not only where you are, but socially, but where you are mentally and intellectually, and how well you can hold a conversation with an individual. And like I said, I wasn't able to go talk this long when I first started, but hopefully some of the results can become evident. But again, the big takeaway is the process. So if we come into this thing um, and only apply ourselves to what is being given at this time, but we don't continue to apply this outside of these meetings, you're going to miss out on progress, So whether we like it or not, a year is going to happen. Next year will be here. Hopefully, next year will come, will arrive. Hopefully, we will be here, to participate and witness that. But the question is, how much development will we have in that year? Will we be the same individuals? Will we be 5% better? Or will we be, 50, 80, 90% better? Appreciate you, my brother. Appreciate you. So we must understand how Mr. Garvey described this course. Talks about over 42 subjects. So earlier, Tony Martin said that he said, let's just go back, but he said 22 subjects. He said Garvey designed the 22 lessons in London. And then at the next page, he says, it's not the next page. All right, yeah, I gotta stop moving around. 22 lessons. Okay, 2 paragraphs later, says over 42 subjects, much of it remained unwritten, for it was in the nature of a confidential in-house affair. Again, that goes back to it's a small group. Honestly, I don't, I've spoken with my elders, my teacher, Ross Marvin, those that have taught him, other individuals that have taken the class. Brother Shaka Barak out of Chicago is also a great resource. He was a student of the Honorable Charles L. James, so he can provide a level of, additional knowledge or lessons, but it's somewhat, it's I don't think it, at least for me, this has not been clearly defined, the unwritten lessons. There is a level of interpretation that takes place when you read the text, humility. It's not a written lesson, but it is implied. Mr. Garvey talks a bit about health, hygiene, speaks to the importance of confidence, but that's not a lesson, not necessarily a particular lesson. So there are some things that Mr. Garvey kind of speaks to repeatedly throughout different lessons, but he doesn't highlight them as a specific lesson, and that's kind of what I've taken away as some of the unwritten lessons. But I don't think there's anyone that, or there hasn't been anyone that I've come across that can document, straightforward the 20 unwritten lessons. That's my point. But last thing I'll say on this, when I've spoken to my elders about it, because that was the first thing that I brought forth. I was like, hey man, you show we read this book. It talks about 22 written lessons, but it also says that there's 20 unwritten lessons. And how do I find out the unwritten lessons? But that was in 2021, and that's when I was instructed to write the book out. He said you got to start with writing the book out. And here we are 5 years later, continuing to develop and promote these lessons, but continuing to learn at the same time. So no definitive, for me at least, on the 20 unwritten, but I think we can deduce some of them at least. Last couple paragraphs. Garvey's overriding concern was to develop within his organizers a fierce Afrocentric view of the world. Very important. I would highlight that first point. What was Mr. Garvey's focus, or what was he trying to instill? And I would say an Afrocentric view, African-centered view. Easiest way to think about that is the level of spectacles of glasses. But it's having, it's just it is as if normally you see things a certain way, but after applying things through the lens of the course of African philosophy, you see things differently. And that's really what it's about. It's giving you a lens, an African-centered lens through which to see the world and interact with the world, specifically for the benefit of our people and our race. He accepted as given the fact that the white race had imposed its viewpoint on the world, and he thought that African people would have to adopt similar strategies on their own behalf. The first position would tolerate no permanent allies. Oh, the race first position would tolerate no permanent allies from among other groups. Whites were to be manipulated where possible, but their propaganda was to be avoided and counteracted. Under no circumstances were they to obtain positions of influence or control over Black organizations. The course, reported the Boston Chronicles after an interview with Garvey. This is also important. This is what Mr. Garvey says about the course. It would instill an independent outlook, a philosophy entirely Negroid, void of anything that will subjugate the mind of the Negro. So this is a further expounding on the African-centered view, but looking specifically what Mr. Garvey said, quote, an independent outlook. So having an independent outlook, philosophy that is entirely Negroid or African, but in our best interest and void of anything that would subjugate the mind of the Negro or be against or not beneficial in the mind of a Negro or African. In the context of a confidential conclave, that's very important as well. You don't have to highlight it, but it's something to remember. Mr. Garvey developed the course of African philosophy in the context of a confidential conclave, very important. And with his lifetime experience behind him, Garvey could be much less guarded in his speech than would have been the case otherwise. I look to this for me goes to philosophy and opinions and speeches. Any public speaker, anyone that's given a public speech or had to speak publicly, you already know you can't be honest and blunt and frank, with what it is that you're thinking or your opinions. You have to be, or you should be, you're encouraged to be political, and not to be offensive. But it's more of an opportunity to fail than to succeed. A job of a public speaker. But again, this is a confidential conclave. Mr. Garvey doesn't have to worry about that. So the tone, which it will speak of, is a little bit different. Garvey could be less guarded in his speech than would have been the case otherwise. So private, it is what it is. Ain't nobody watching. He don't care what nobody says. While forcefully attempting to lead his people out of the domination of the white group, he could accordingly, frankly, admire their methods. So I respect that. I like that. We got to keep it real. When others one up us, outwit us, fool us, we got to nod to that. Hey, you got me. You got one. You did your thing on that. Whites knew exactly what they wanted, and in the final analysis, subordinated much else to their pursuit of racial self-interest. So this should be expected. We're I don't like to compare ourselves to others, but in a sense, each group is striving for what is best for their group. So if another group is trying to do what's best for their group to the detriment of us, of course we're gonna fight back. Of course we don't like it. But on a higher level, from an organizational leadership level, you got to pay a little bit of respect. You know what I mean? They doing what's best for them and for their community. I have to respect that. Never swallow wholly what the white man writes or says without first critically analyzing it. So don't take their information until we critically analyze it. He taught in lesson 1, but this did not mean that the African race should eschew the white group's methods. He says, quote, things that may not be true, he suggested in the same lesson, can be made so if you repeat them long and often enough. Therefore, always repeat statements that will give your race status and an advantage. This is how the white man has built up his system of superiority. That's a question that comes up later. But, even if things aren't true, it can be made so if you repeat them long and often enough. And he says that's what, the other races have done, even if they haven't been the best or the smartest or whatever it may be. Them repeating these false statements has put them over time into a position of advantage, according to Mr. Garvey's opinion. Garvey in his heyday had to contend with white self-interest and opportunism from both right and left. He simultaneously praised Lenin and Trotsky for their work in the Soviet Union and resisted the unprincipled attempts of the Communist Party of the USA to bore from within his organization. Here in the course of African philosophy, he presented his students with the rare evaluation of Karl Marx. says communism was founded principally on the theory of Karl Marx, who knew very little about Negroes, who thought and wrote less about them. So Mr. Karl Marx's opinion will, it'll come up later. So I think that's a takeaway. We should understand Mr. Garvey's opinion on Karl Marx and communism. He said it seeks to put government in the hands of an ignorant white mass who has not been able to destroy their natural prejudices towards Negroes and other non-white people. Mr. Garvey got a whole lesson on communism. I think it's lesson 17, but he goes through that more in depth later. On the question of Jews, as on the question of communists, Garvey's race first position led him to a duality of attitude. So this is where I get in, where I get the sentiments of a level of respect that Mr. Garvey kind of relented, at least at the end of his life. And I think he did this in his younger years as well. Garvey's race first position led him to a duality of attitude. In traditional African American vein, he praised the Jews for their group solidarity and resented their position of influence and power in certain economic and political aspects of Black life. So he understood they were organizing and doing what's best for them, but at the same time, he resented their influence and how they could, you know, reduce the resources that would go into the Black community. So duality of attitude in regards to the Jews. He himself had come into business contact with Jews at various times and with both good and bad results. He showed considerable pique during his trial for alleged mail fraud in 1923, where the presiding judge, Julian Mack, happened to be an important figure in North American Zionism. For the most part, there should be few surprises in these lessons for those already familiar with Garvey's ideology. What we find here is the standard fare of race first, whether in religion, literature, historical studies, intergroup relations, or in other areas, self-reliance and nationhood. What is new and fascinating is the tone of many of these utterances, coming as they do near the end of his life and in a confidential setting. So, one of the things I like about Garvey is his consistency. A lot of the things we'll read here, and we should understand Mr. Garvey had just turned 50 years old in August 1937. So this is him looking back, but the tone is different. A lot of the things he kind of repeats some of the same sentiments that he had in 20s, 30s, and 40 years old. Well, 30 and 40 years old, 20s, yeah, that works. His 20s, 30s, and 40s, he repeats some of the same sentiments, but the tone is a little bit different, and that's just something that we should take away from the lessons. And I would say it's just more direct. It's more concise. The message is more concise. Equally new in emphasis, though not in substance, is his insistent advocacy of discipline. Garvey emerges here beneath the flamboyance usually associated with his name, beneath the genius for organizing, beneath the oratorical eloquence for which he was legendary as an advocate of hard work, singleness of purpose, and self-discipline. The leader must strive to master his shortcomings, he says. The race must strive for excellence. So again, that representation, whether we're representing ourselves, our immediate family, our race, or our government and organization, we must strive to represent excellence. It says, quote, the greatest men and women in the world burn the midnight lamp. That'll come up as a later question. Nor does he spare the lazy and unmotivated within his own group. Like a Booker T. Washington or Malcolm X or Elijah Muhammad, Garvey was not one to cover up the shortcomings of his own people. The majority of the Negroes are ignorant, he says in lesson 21, but the intent, as always, is positive. As other people were willing to sacrifice their time and even their lives to Christianize our race, so we must exercise patience and time to civilize our people. Garvey cannot, any more than anybody else, escape totally from the confines of his time. There's much assorted homely advice on diet, grooming, and love, among other things. Some of this is timeless, but some seems dated and passé from the perspective of 4 decades later. The lessons are not without their unexpected asides of dry humor either. Quote, never try to make a speech on an empty stomach, he warned. Excuse me, oh my gosh. That was so embarrassing. You may faint and die before you are finished. I don't know where that came from. I ain't even been drinking no soda. The first course of African philosophy was followed by examinations held on September 23rd, 1937. 10 students were successful. That's another important question. 10 students were successful. There were 11 in the first class, but 10 were successful. Successful students were Arthur C. Moore of Toronto, Charles L. James of Gary, Indiana, James R. Stewart, Cleveland, Ohio, Thomas W. Harvey, Philadelphia, Nathaniel Grissom of Chicago, Miss Sarah Richardson Isaacs of Philadelphia, Miss Ethel Waddell of Chicago, Miss Teresa E. Young of Cincinnati, Miss Eleanor White of Chicago, and Abraham R. Roberts of Toronto. Joseph L. Gray of Charleston, Missouri, did not graduate, but was continued as a student. So 11 students, 10 graduates in the first class. First group of graduates was immediately sent out as UNIA commissioners to the North American field. Some of them in due course instructed classes in the course of African philosophy. Charles L. James taught the course in Gary, St. Louis, and New Orleans. James R. Stewart offered the course in Cleveland. 3 of the 10, Stewart, Harvey, and James. So that's the answer to what question that I had in the previous lesson. But 3 of the 10 of the first students in turn occupied the organization's highest post, that of President General. So we should know James R. Stewart, Thomas W. Harvey, and Charles L. James. 3 students of the first class went on to become President Generals of the UNIA, and we should know their order as well. Second was James R. Stewart. Third, William Sherrill. Fourth, Thomas W. Harvey. And fifth, Charles L. James. In 1938, Garvey introduced the lessons as a correspondence course conducted from his London headquarters. His Black Man magazine published the names of 7 graduates in June 1939. So I'm pretty sure we could find that in the UNIA papers in 1939, from where 4 were from the United States, with 1 each from Nigeria, Uganda, and South Africa. They were Benjamin W. Jones of Philadelphia, J.O. Nwanolu of Onitsha, Nigeria, Miss H.T. McNary of Detroit, D.S. Mosuke of Kampala, Uganda, Miss Keturah Paul of New York City, H. Eletintro of Cape Province, South Africa, and Miss E.M. Collins of New York. Names of additional graduates were to be promised for the next issue of the Black Man, but no further issues were published. Garvey died the following year on June 10th, 1940. So part of my understanding is this was intended to be a continuing program. Unfortunately, Mr. Garvey transitioned in 1940. One of the things that I've noticed is, again, in the 1938-1939 class, Mr. Garvey got more students from the continent. First class was strictly North American. Second class, we have Philadelphia, New York, but you also have some members from the continent, South Africa, Uganda, what was in Nigeria. So a bit of a expansion. And again, the first students immediately went out and began to teach the course as well. School of African Philosophy came at the end of many years of the UNIA. Efforts in the field of education in the organization's original aims and objects in 1914 included the establishment of educational institutions. Garvey's trip to the United States in 1916 was intended initially as a fundraising tour for the UNIA's projected agricultural and industrial school in Jamaica. That's an important question. At various times during the 1920s, the organization ran a Booker T. Washington University in Harlem, New York, a Liberty University in Claremont, Virginia, and in-service courses for UNIA civil servants branches in several countries ran elementary and secondary schools. Famous educators and scholars such as Hubert H. Harrison, J.A. Rogers, Carter G. Woodson, and many more were associated with the organization at one time or another. UNIA schools had always had the same ultimate purpose, namely the presentation of an African-centered perspective. So that came up again, the intentions to instill an African-centered perspective must be a core component of our education systems. The School of African Philosophy had itself been in the making from as early as 1934. So that's the answer. In that year, the UNIA's Seventh International Convention of the Negro Peoples of the World, meeting in Kingston, Jamaica, authorized the establishment of, quote, the college for the purpose of training leaders who are to supervise the work in different parts of the world. So I would also argue that to be one of the purposes of the course of African philosophy. Mr. Garvey says intelligence in the course of African philosophy rules the world and ignorance carries the burden. The intelligence of which he spoke was not merely book learning, but the self-interested common sense which the race seemed to lack. He expressed it in this way in a fictitious father-son dialogue in 1935. He said, "Education, boy, is a mighty force, is the weapon of human control. If you can educate a people in the idea that you have, they will react to your satisfaction, whether the education as a propaganda is right or wrong. It is fitting that the UNIA's last educational endeavor in Garvey's lifetime should have been the first that he himself was able to conduct from start to finish. These quotes are important. I have given them all I know," he declared to the people of Detroit in 1937, "and I am trying to make everyone a Marcus Garvey personified." We read that was in his September 1937 message in Toronto. We read that last week as well. And that concludes I think the foreword was first and then the preface. That concludes the preface. We got a few minutes, and I want to get straight to the questions and see how much we can get knocked out. Oh, y'all, let's see that. All right, y'all ready? Everybody ready? I think y'all ready. First question, how many aims and objects are there in the UNIA? And this was not listed in this reading, but it's something we should know.
11.
11. Brother Everett is very close. We currently have 10 aims and objectives.
Are they asking for then or now?
It's a trick question. So
I keep thinking that for some reason I'm still confused. I thought we changed that and it's still 11. I need to get some clarity on it.
Every time I've looked at it, is the same. But we'll talk about that at
Okay.
HEC.
Gotcha. Yeah.
What members of the UNIA was the course of African philosophy created for? Who was the course of African philosophy created for?
Leadership.
What leadership?
Wasn't it to create a group of leaders that will be able to train other leaders to be in a leadership position?
Close, yes. Yeah, that's good enough. You will get credit for that. To train a cadre of UNIA leaders to carry on the great work of the association after Mr. Garvey's death. Says Mr. Garvey made several attempts to educate some, re-educate others who would be charged with the responsibility of leadership in the UNIA. So leaders in the UNIA, those that would carry on the work and carry on that responsibility of leadership. So yeah, leadership in the UNIA is the basic answer. For those and I like that for those outside of the UNIA that talk about they read Message to the People Course of African Philosophy and how much it's done for them. But if you ain't in the UNIA, like I don't, I mean, there's some things that are universal, but you're really not understanding the text. If you read that whole thing and you're still not in the UNIA, I don't think you really read it. Which branch or division of the UNIA was responsible for establishing training departments? Who was responsible for establishing the training departments of the UNIA? And this is according to the text. This will be an easy one. Come on, y'all.
We are
Who is we?
the leaders,
That's too
the
general.
students
The graduate.
of the school, right? The
Which
graduates.
branch or division of the UNIA was responsible for establishing training departments?
Ew.
That's specific. Which branch or division? And that should be a capital division. Probably capital B too. So is there a specific department or a division of the UNIA that's responsible
The
for
education.
establishing
The education department.
the education department? That's a good answer. Got our Minister of Education here. Anyone else? According to
think-
Give up. I can't remember.
I don't want to hear our opinions. I want to know what does the text say was the branch or division that was responsible for establishing training departments. All right. We got to move quickly. Says
I
in,
think each individual division should
in
have
every
their.
in every branch of the association, training departments were established, and it spoke to specifically. I don't want to have to keep going back and forth.
Did they say something about making one in each division?
Hold on. That'll make me go to the text. Am I sharing my screen? Or am I sharing? Yeah, okay. I'm not sharing my screen. Oh, yeah, I was. Okay. Whoa, shoot. So I was sharing that the whole time. I wasn't sharing the questions. In every branch of the association, training departments were established. In general, these included military training courses of nurses, and programs for juveniles. So I would argue, as I've argued before, um, we are cohesive, we are organized, but we must also display a level of self-initiative, as Mr. Garvey would say. We cannot, I don't think we can wait for others to provide the specific training for our community. So, you know, if things are being done and being taken care of, and there are programs in that department, I would definitely lean into those programs. But for example, automotive repair. You know, if we wanted to have an automotive repair program, do we wait until the African Motor Corps develops or presents a automotive program, or is that something that we can, hey, let's get together, let's change our oil, check our brakes, rotate our tires, and learn a little bit on our own level. So that's, it's a balance, but specifically, it does say that each branch had training departments. So got a lot of statements in the chat. I can't go through all this chat. If you wanna. Okay, I see some. Sorry, I'm reading chat, y'all. Trying to expand my chat. I don't know if y'all can see that. I hope y'all can. All right, no problem. Okay, we will proceed. Let me share the right screens. Briefly name the school in Claremont, Virginia that was established in 1926. This is not really relevant. Yeah, I'm just it's Universal Liberty University. It's is making a connection on the terms universal and liberty. Those are common terms and phrases used by Mr. Garvey and the UNIA. So Liberty Hall, things like that, and obviously a lot of the universal concepts, Universal African Black Cross Nurses, Universal African Legion, so forth. What year was the first School of African Philosophy taught?
1937.
1937, Big Brother
Reed
Everett.
left.
1937, after extensive European tour. Okay. How many students were in the first class? It's not critical.
11.
Say again.
11.
11 students. How many graduates?
10.
Absolutely. 11 students, 10 graduates. Joseph L. Gray of Charleston, Missouri, was continued as a student, but when we look at the 1938-1939 class, we did not see Brother Joseph L. Gray listed as a graduate, so um, he didn't make it. Y'all didn't see that. Which student was the leader of the first class that received the highest grade?
Charles L. James.
Charles L. James, yes. My classmates all agree I was the leader of the first class, Charles L. James. And why was Charles L. James hesitant to enroll in the course?
Thought he knew it all.
Absolutely, brother Cornelius. Had to hold you back. You helping too much. Yeah, he thought he knew it all. He said he had the qualifications, but his ego and so forth. Humility, be humble, be curious, be willing to learn. Something I was gonna say on that. Curiosity, somebody forcing you to do it, or desire. We'll talk about that later. But curiosity, being curious about something, um, being obedient, somebody forcing you to do something, and having the internal desire. But that's other stuff. That ain't about tonight. What was the schedule of the first course taught by Garvey? We're not gonna go into that. We ain't got time for that. How many days and how often per day? Did anybody remember?
30
days.
days and nights and twice a day.
Pretty much. Yep. 30 days and nights, 2 sessions per day, mass meetings at 8 p.m. Very strenuous program. And we should also, when I read about that, one of the first things that come to my mind is the first International Convention of Negro Peoples of the World that took place August 1st, 1920 to August 1st to August 31st, 1920, where thousands of our ancestors came together in New York, where they talk about how they, lived together, ate together, worked together. So Mr. Garvey, with the small group, kind of repeated that a similar process, and I think that's something. We kind of see the benefits of that when we come together at HEC and convention. But a 2 week, I can imagine a 2 week program where we all really have time and can take time to be together for 2 weeks. I think that'd be powerful. But Mr. Garvey was able to do that for a month. Okay, sorry about that. Who was appointed the authentic historian of the life and works of the Honorable Marcus Garvey, and who appointed that individual? Who was the authentic historian?
Tony
Tony.
Martin,
Dr. Tony Martin. Who appointed Dr. Tony Martin?
Charles
Yes.
L. James,
What was Charles L. James' position during the time of that appointment?
President General.
Absolutely, yes. Charles L. James, fifth President General, appointed Dr. Tony Martin as the official, authentic historian of the life and works of Marcus Garvey in 1937. So that is why we highlight Race First by Dr. Tony Martin. But Dr. Tony Martin, I would argue he was the last, authentic historian of the UNIA. So the new Marcus Garvey Library is big, but Dr. Tony Martin, again, under the leadership of Charles L. James, was able to preserve a lot of these documents for us and officially do that. What? All right. Brother Eric, you and that going. Who owns the course of African philosophy? Who does it belong to? Nobody knows. Charles L. James said this course is ours. In as I've asked about this, the more I've asked about it, does that mean Africans? Does that mean UNIA members? Does that mean leaders of the UNIA? Um, my the answer that I've gotten is um, this would be the graduates of the course of African philosophy. So prior to or in the same realm that Charles L. James is speaking about who the course belongs to, that's the same area where he talks about the others um, have already transitioned. So, that's neither here nor there. Okay, preface. We'll try to run through the preface quickly. I think I got more questions on the preface. What compilation of work is considered the closest thing to a book that Marcus Garvey ever wrote?
The course of African philosophy.
Course of African Philosophy, absolutely. Course of African Philosophy is a unique document with the exception of his poetical works. Close thing to a book that Marcus Garvey ever wrote. I don't have the page on that, but what does the course of African philosophy represent? And this is in the editor's opinion. What did the editor say that this course of African philosophy represents?
The last political will and testament.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Brother Cornelius. It represents, as it were, the last political will and testament of a man who stands without equal in the history of worldwide mobilization of African peoples. What was the years and birth? What were the years for the birth and death of Marcus Garvey and exact dates for bonus? What's the years of Marcus Garvey's life?
1887 and 1940.
1887, 1940. Anybody got the more specific? Thank you, Brother Cornelius. You are correct.
August 7th and
June 10th.
yep, June 10th.
August 7th, 1887, June 10th, 1940. And what years was Mr. Garvey in the United States?
1916 to 27.
1916 to 27. More specifically, I believe it was March 1916. There's some debate on when he was exiled, whether it's November or December 1927. But 1916, 1927. When and where was the UNIA founded as an organization?
Jamaica.
When?
1914.
Yep, Kingston, Jamaica, 1914.
Last night.
This one is, I think it's a little bit more tougher, but how does the editor describe what the course of African philosophy is?
You know how it goes to the assembly line? Yeah.
Somebody got back.
And they didn't realize it.
Sister Diane, you got background coming through. I'm gonna mute your line. How does the editor describe what the course of African philosophy is? It's close to, it's similar to question 2, but it was stated differently.
It's like a cadre or something. Oh, I forgot how he says it.
Installation of a lifetime of organizational experience.
There it is.
Yeah.
Nothing less than a distillation of a lifetime of organizational experience. So these are Mr. Garvey's lessons that he's learned over his 50 years of life. What was the immediate purpose of the course of African philosophy?
To train people to be like, or to be, a word that he used, but pretty much to make everybody in his mold, to be able to carry on the lessons to teach and train.
Yes, that quote, to make everybody in his mold, that's going to come up at the end, worded just slightly differently. Immediate purpose of the course of African philosophy was to train a cadre of UNIA leaders who would carry on the great work of the organization after Mr. Garvey's death. It's 10:30, brothers and sisters. I want to wrap up we got to wrap up in 5 minutes, so we got to run through this. What was the requirement to pass the courses as taught by Mr. Garvey? What did the first
Examination.
students have to do?
Write it out in their handwriting.
Write it out in their own handwriting. What else?
Were there several examinations and tests they had to pass as well? They had to
There's at
pass
least
the
one
course.
examination. Well, it's implied. So it states clearly that required to write out each lesson in their own handwriting. And it also mentions on the page 19 of the preface and page 12 of the preface, it looks like first courses were followed by examinations, is one of the things it says. And in another place, it says, in every point of examination, it's Charles L. James saying that he was graded E. So I'm not sure if the examination was just a review of your writing of the lessons or if the examination was something separate. I don't have that clarity based on what was written, but I do know that they had to write out the lessons in their own hand, and there was some form of examination. Whether those were the same or separate, I don't know. For us, you will be required to complete an examination and must get a grade of 85% or better. That'll be at the end of the 6 months. So, but also, as Lady President Sister Cation said, highly recommend us in this time to write out the text. How many lessons or subjects were there total, and what was the difference in the type of lessons so far from what?
22 subjects for 22 lessons.
42 subjects, 22 lessons?
Because 20 of them, some of them were unwritten.
Yeah.
Yeah, Brother Cornelius, you doing it. Over 42 subjects, you can say 42 subjects, over 42. Written and unwritten was the difference. So 22 written, which we have documented, and 20 that were unwritten that were committed to memory. What was Garvey's beliefs about the course of African philosophy? What did Mr. Garvey believe about this course?
That this course was going to be the golden seal on leadership within the UNIA, because he didn't feel as though anyone was able to really take the reins from him because he hadn't taught them yet. So this was going to be that stamp. The stamp. I'm sorry, I'm not using the exact words in the text, but
No. Hey, look, I like that. It is about it's duality. One, it is about, I would argue, knowing what Mr. Garvey said, knowing his opinion clearly, but being able to articulate that in our own words is important as well. So I like what you're doing. I like how you presented that. I believe this is where he speaks to African centered.
And it developed within his organizers a fierce Afrocentric view of the world.
Firstly, Mr. Garvey believed that it was a most rigid system of training. So, and I think that's where I like the writing it out. Honestly, we're a little. I can say this over the years, we as a people, we're a little soft, we're a little comfortable. We like Zoom presentations and people reading and audio books and people reading for us. But we really have to get to the rigid aspects of studying and education. So that repetition, that rewording, summarizing, highlighting things that are important, but really being able to internalize and extract information from a source. So, a most rigid system of training to develop a fierce Afrocentric view of the world. The course would instill an independent outlook for philosophy entirely Negroid, void of anything that would subjugate the mind of a Negro. So, two things that Mr. Garvey said about the course. How has the white man built up his system of superiority?
by repeating the same lie again and again until people believe it.
Pretty much. Always repeat statements that will give your race status and advantage. So Absolutely. What was Garvey's view on Karl Marx and communism?
He didn't
How
know enough black people.
Absolutely. He didn't know and he really didn't care. Knew very little about Negroes and who thought and wrote less about them. And communism, he said communism seeks to put government in the hands of the ignorant white mass. So we actually just had a discussion earlier today. Dr. Kuda, myself, and Brother Shaka were preparing for a celebration for Nigerian independence tomorrow. But one of the words that came up was comrade. And this is that connection that you get with the course of African philosophy, because I knew Brother Shaka had an issue with that word, and that comes down to what Mr. Garvey says in this text. He says that we should not refer to brothers or sisters as comrades, and specifically because that term has been associated with communism. But Mr. Garvey has his opinions on Karl Marx and communism. What is Mr. Garvey's views on the Jews or the Jewish culture?
I, I know he said that some business was good, some of it was bad. Um, I'm not sure if he was referring to them as ones that got over on us a couple of times or not.
He respected their solidarity,
Yep.
but he didn't like their relations with us.
Yes. He didn't like the influence and power that they had
Oh,
over us. But duality of attitude is how well, he mentions that in the text, a duality of attitude. And this is Tony Martin's opinion. He said that Garvey had a duality of attitude. He praised their solidarity and resented their positions of influence and power, specifically as it relates to our people.
economic.
I don't know. I don't remember reading this one. What was Garvey's position on the majority of Negroes?
Yeah, he got that in there.
Cornelius, we hear you, brother. What was Garvey's position on the majority of Negroes? And let's see what we got in the chat. Somebody.
I saw it in
I was going to give an answer, but I can't. I don't know if this is the answer for the class, though.
What you think?
wanted to say that most of us are uneducated or something like that. But I don't think that's the answer that you're looking for.
Brother Everett ain't changed, brother. You still having the right answers and you scared to, pull the trigger.
Oh, damn.
You got them lined up in your scope, bro. You got to just, pull that trigger. Majority of Negroes were ignorant.
Yeah. I thought he said that somewhere else too, though, right?
Yeah, because this is just a quote from lesson 21. He says it
All right.
again in lesson
That's what I'm
21.
saying. Okay, all right.
But this is important. And again, specifically, he says ignorant to the self-interested common sense that the race seemed to lack. So be careful with this. Don't just apply a blatant blanket of ignorance to our people and say, oh yeah, Garvey said black people were ignorant. He wrong for that. He had a particular opinion again, and it's based upon his experience. He said that majority of Negroes were ignorant to the self-interested common sense that the race seemed to lack. And this is a very important concept as well. The spectrum of ignorance and intelligence. That is really one of the primary objectives that Mr. Garvey is trying to instill in us is a process to develop our intelligence, to increase our intelligence month after month, week after week, year after year. But that is the goal, is to, again, he says, intelligence rules the world, ignorance carries the burden. So seek as far as possible to be intelligence, and basically remove yourself as far as possible from ignorance. So intelligence is it's almost, he implies it as a ultimate nullifier. It's no way around it. There's no way to defeat supreme intelligence. So if we acquire supreme intelligence, we can teach and embody that intelligence. There won't be any way in which we can be defeated. But he also implies intelligence as a process to becoming righteous. You can't be a righteous, or it's difficult to be a righteous individual if you're ignorant. Last page, got a couple more questions. I know we way over time. When was the second class of Course of African Philosophy taught, and how many graduates were in the second class?
Wasn't it a correspondence course that he taught from England?
What year?
Oh wow. 38. Wasn't it the
Absolutely.
father?
Absolutely.
38.
Yes. Yes. And that's yeah,
And I
that's
think
that's really what it's about. We should understand 1937, Mr. Garvey started with 11 students, 10 graduates. 1938 was the second class. How many graduates did he have in the second class?
7.
7 graduates in the second class. Absolutely.
In
But
fact, Uganda, US.
you're killing it. But the takeaway, this was intended, in my opinion, to be a continuous program. And the only reason it did not continue, it, well, yeah, the only reason it didn't continue, well, I don't, it did kind of continue, but Mr. Garvey transitioned. So that was a big obstacle to the progression of the program. But it spoke about James R. Stewart and Charles L. James continuing these lessons. So that's why it's important, like for brothers like Shaka Barak, to give some insight as to when these lessons were taught and the history behind that. But for Mr. Garvey himself, 1937, he started, 1938, he continued. He planned for a 1939 class, but he unfortunately transitioned. What was the original intent of Mr. Garvey's trip to the United States in 1916?
Fundraiser.
Fundraiser for what?
These
What was he trying
two-part.
to do?
Was it to raise money for the university, the Liberty University?
Start schools, yeah.
Yeah, y'all kind of, what kind of, all right. Somebody might have it in the chat. Well, I got to go straight to it. Fundraising tour for the UNIA projected agricultural and industrial school in Jamaica. Who had a famous or was famous for developing an agricultural and industrial school?
Booker T.
Booker T, absolutely. So that's part of the connection. Booker T passed in November of 1915. There is some correspondence that we've seen where Mr. Garvey was in communication with Booker T. Washington, and he was planning to come to the United States to speak to Booker T. Washington, and basically bring that information back to Jamaica and duplicate agricultural and industrial school similar to Booker T. Washington's success. So we've got to know that connection and the inspiration, I would say, of Booker T. Washington, not only in this school, but the text Up from Slavery. Mr. Garvey felt, prior to this discussion and connection, reading of Up from Slavery as Mr. Garvey was traveling back from Europe, to my understanding, gave Mr. Garvey the inspiration to develop and lead a movement for our people. So I want that, that should be understood, that connection with Booker T. Washington. And specifically, Mr. Garvey came to the United States to raise funds to do what Booker T. Washington was doing here, but to do that in Jamaica. When was the School of African Philosophy agreed upon by the UNIA, and what were the circumstances? I don't even know this one. I think I know it now. Yeah, I remember it now.
The convention with the 5-year program. I can't tell what the year was, but I thought it was in convention. It was part of the 5-year program, 5-year goals. And
In a sense, anybody know the year of that convention? I don't know. The 5-year plan was mentioned in that convention, but I would say those are two separate things. I
The
think.
1935.
No. Was it 35?
I don't know. That's the question I keep wondering.
1934.
Dang.
School of African Philosophy. Now you got to make me question my quote. I got to go making sure I got the right. I'm pretty sure I got the right number. School of African Philosophy had in itself been in the making as early as 1934. Oh my goodness. Um, the conditions, we talked about it. Just trying to, and that's why the first question was how many aims and objects there are in the UNIA. Brother Everett, if we were talking about the 11 aims and objects, which aim and object relates to the course of African philosophy and education?
Um, I don't know the number, but to create universities and schools, I would say.
Yes, it was originally number 9.
Oh,
It's currently number 8. But to establish schools, academies, and universities for the racial education and uplift of our people. So um, that was mentioned as well. How the School of African Philosophy was also part of the original aims and objects. What rules the world? Oh, what rules the world and what carries the burden? Blank rules the world, blank carries the burden.
Intelligence rules the world, ignorance carries the burden.
Yes, sir. Intelligence rules the world, ignorance carries the burden. Famous Garvey quote. Couple more questions. What was the first educational endeavor that Marcus Garvey himself was able to conduct from start to finish?
Establishing the school in Virginia.
No,
I thought it was. I thought it was this course.
absolutely. It's fitting that the UNIA's last educational endeavor in Garvey's lifetime should have been the first that he was able to conduct from start to finish. So the last thing that he did was the first thing that he was able to conduct from start to finish, according to Dr. Tony Martin. And last question, what were Garvey's 2 quotes to the people in Detroit in 1937?
I have given them all I know, and I
Mm-hmm.
am trying to make everyone a Marcus Garvey personified.
Absolutely. I have given them all I know, and I'm trying to make everyone a Marcus Garvey personified. So, as Brother James, right, Baltimore.
Yes, sir.
To your point, like the mold, trying to make everyone in his mold. Um, I am trying to make everyone a Marcus Garvey personified. I would argue he's not. He doesn't want us to be carbon copies of him. We are in a different time, and our personality and presentation should be modernized. So he does want us to understand his principles, his philosophy, be able to modernize. The aims and objects. Preamble is the preamble, but the articulation of the UNIA must be modernized. And in addition to that, our style, the clothes that Mr. Garvey wore, we've got to update that for ourselves and for our time. But we are supposed to be at this time the 21st century version of a Garveyite. So Mr. Garvey and our ancestors, they took care of the 20th century. It's our time to personify Mr. Garvey in the 21st century and show the world what that looks like. And I would argue a key component of what that looks like starts with our intelligence. So that's all I got, brothers and sisters. We went over a little bit, but thank you for everyone coming and attending. And I really do like to stress the beginning. So what we went over last week, I would encourage you to review that again. I'll provide this recording shortly as well, but this is just the reading. So go through the preface and the foreword again. But this is the foundation. And once I know Brother Oster uses the term, the train leaves the station. But once the train leaves the station or the boat leaves the dock, we're not coming back to this foundational information. Next week we're going to be in lesson 1 of the course of African philosophy. So we've read some Robert Hill text. A lot of it was Marcus Garvey, but that was documented by a lot of it was documented by secretaries. So we read some Robert Hill, we read Charles L. James, we read Tony Martin. From next week until the end of this training, the only person we're going to be getting information from is Marcus Garvey himself. So I want everyone to understand the background. But as of next week, the work kind of begins. And again, this is a lifelong process. So I don't want y'all to think after 6 months you got it, you know. And we got all the solutions for the UNIA and for our people. And Mr. Garvey even says in the text, you can tell who knows the information best by how they are able to utilize it for the benefit of our people, or specifically for the purposes of organization. So the individual that can organize the best in the name of the UNIA, in a sense, is displaying the highest level of knowledge of these lessons. But if you're not out organizing anybody, stop playing. We gotta stop playing around. 10:52, brothers and sisters. I don't have anything else. Closing questions and comments. And why is my camera way up there? Y'all didn't tell me my camera. Got the top of my head. No questions or comments. 10:52. It is late, and appreciate everyone's attention. We will, lesson 1 next week. I don't know how we're gonna do this. Honestly, I don't have enough time to read. We don't have enough time to read lesson 1. It's one of the longest lessons. Lesson 1 and lesson 21, I believe, are the longest lessons. I don't know which one is the longest, but I need you all to read lesson 1 this week. We'll come back and go through. I want to just kind of go through the questions of lesson 1 and spend the entire time just going through the questions. So please, everyone, read the lesson. We do have recordings on YouTube. On Division 421 YouTube, we've got recordings of the readings, if that will help. But we really don't have time to read a whole lesson next week, is kind of what I'm getting at. And I don't want to be here this late next week. All right. If there aren't any questions or comments, anyone wish to, let me see if I got some officers up here. Brother Mason, you still on? Brother Kamal, Kofi.
I got you, President John.
Thank you, Brother Mason. First Vice President. Just closing.
All right. Place the flag on the screen, put the right fist in the air, repeat after me with our motto and our slogan. One God.
One God.
One aim.
One aim.
One destiny.
One destiny.
Africa for the Africans.
Africa for the
Africans.
Those at home.
Those at
home.
And those abroad.
And
those abroad.
Race first, family.
Race first.
Good job, everyone. Go in peace.
Thank you, President John.
No problem. See y'all
Thank you,
tomorrow.
everyone.
Nigeria celebration. Send out the invitation in just a moment.
Peace, love, and goodness to all. Grace first.
Thank you. Grace first.
Grace first.